Hi, welcome to Hill and Ponton's live Q&A. I'm Shannon Brewer. I'm one of the senior attorneys at Hill and Ponton, and I'm here to answer your questions today. So we can just get started anytime. First question, AC2074. Thank you all. I was denied sleep apnea, only submitted diagnosis. Filed supplemental claim with Nexus, explained direct and secondary to service-connected condition, DBQ, buddy statements, personal statements, just got denied again. The reason is I did not submit new and relevant evidence. Part of the explanation is in support of your claim, new and relevant evidence has been received, and your claim is now reconsidered. And it goes on to the examiner disagrees with the evidence and calorie intake is the cause, even though Nexus says service-connected disability. Limits physical activity. Shouldn't a tie go to me? Yes, but so let me just kind of talk first about, it sounds like they did acknowledge that you had new and relevant evidence. So they didn't deny based on that. They denied on the fact that they feel like their evidence is better than your evidence. Their CMP exam, for instance, that's what they're basing it on. And a tie should go to you. One of the basic tenets of VA disability law is that you have the benefit of the doubt. Veteran always gets the benefit of the doubt. The problem is VA is deciding when there's a tie, and they very rarely ever find a tie. The board does more than the regional office, but a lot of times they will say that the evidence is not in equipoise, that their evidence is better than your evidence. And so in that case, they're saying it wasn't a tie, so you don't get the benefit of that doubt. But I would recommend that you appeal it, keeping in mind that sleep apnea conditions are not the favorite of the VA. They don't like to grant those. So you really need strong evidence, and you need to continue to appeal. I recommend that you do what you can at the regional office and then go to the board and see if you can win it there. Don't give up on it yet. It's way too early to give up on that, but you are going to want to continue to appeal and see if you can get it in front of somebody else and then maybe get it granted. Okay, next question is from Mila M. My VSO is telling me that I shouldn't file for a payment increase from 70% to 100% and TDIU benefits at the same time. It looks like I'm trying to see which sticks, and it's not a good strategy. Thoughts? Oh, here's more. She's also saying I should keep the 70% for PTSD and leave it alone, due to saying always a possibility it could be reduced. Honestly, what is your opinion? With the new bill that was passed, can you advise how it will affect mental health claims moving forward and what we should be looking out for? If you have to do a new CMP exam, but your new claim was in place before the bill went into law, what regulations would they use for your CMP exam? Oh, more. I have medical evidence from my doctor as well, showing how it affected my pelvic floor due to MST, military sexual trauma. Granted 70% last year due to PTSD. Should I stick to the PTSD and not add this information with new claim for payment increase, doing payment increase due to showing symptoms worsening? Don't want to confuse them with medical and cause other reasons to get sidetracked. I was just going to submit the new DBQ showing how PTSD is worsening. Okay, that's about 10 questions. So let's go back to the first one. My VSO, okay. So I absolutely disagree with your VSO. I would say absolutely if you're trying to go for 100% and TDIU at the same time, there's absolutely no problem with doing that. We do that all the time. It's a really good strategy because then if they can't give you the 100%, they can give you the unemployability in the same decision and you don't have to wait for it. So, because while the 100% for PTSD currently still requires total social and occupational impairment, the TDIU, the standard's a little actually easier to get to under this law. Under the PTSD regulation, it's easier to get TDIU than it is 100%. So absolutely, I would appeal both at the same time. Next. Yeah, I don't advise taking the 70% and leaving it alone. If you can't work due to your PTSD, you should be getting 100%. That's the way I feel about it. I would not settle for that 70% and leave it alone. I would keep pushing it in general. Now, I mean, if you were lucky to get the 70%, if you barely met the criteria, if really everything supports 50% and they gave you a 70, then I might say that. but it doesn't sound like that's what's going on here if you can't work due to this disability. Okay, next part of the question. Okay, the bill, okay, so they are proposing to change the regulation for mental health. They have not changed it yet. So we don't have a final mental health regulation yet. The changes that they have proposed currently, we're not sure. It's supposed to make it easier to get to 100%. I'm going to reserve judgment on that and see what the final regulation says before I commit to that. I don't know what the final is going to say. And if it's finalized the way it is now, the current iteration of it, it really depends how they apply it. It could make things easier to get to 100%, or it could be worse. So I'm going to wait and see. Once they put that in place, I'm going to see how they apply it before we'll know how good it is. Okay, and the next part of this, if you have to do a new C&P, but your claim was in place before the bill went into law, what regulations do they use? You are supposed to get the one that's more favorable to you. So if that regulation does change while your claim is still pending, you'll get whichever one helps you the most, which is, kind of a benefit of the doubt thing. You get the better of the deal. And then let's see this last part. As far as physical disabilities, if you have a pelvic floor disability, I personally am of the opinion I'd go ahead and file that. It's not going to hurt your PTSD claim. VA I don't really think they look at it that way. I know the VSOs say that, that I wouldn't file everything at the same time. That looks greedy. I don't think VA looks at it that way. I have veterans with 15 different disabilities. They have service connected. If you have a disability, you're entitled to benefits for that. So I wouldn't hold off on that. I'd go ahead and file it. And let's see, you don't want to confuse them and get sidetracked. I don't think it does. So I would still go ahead and file that. And then what was the last part here? Oh, new question. Okay. This one's from Remy 86. Hello, I have SMCS, one condition rated at 100%, and some of my other service-connected conditions added up to 60%. I have two other service-connected conditions, sleep apnea 50% and GERD 10%. Can those be added as an extra step to get me to SMCL? My 100% is for major depressive disorder. I got 50% for migraine, 20% for peripheral neuropathy, and 10% bilaterally for shin splints in both shins. So I don't see that getting you to SMCL. Go back to the first part. Okay, so adding sleep apnea and GERD, I don't think is going to get you to SMCL on its own. That doesn't mean you're not entitled to it. It just means that's not the way I think you're going to get there. So SMCL, there's several ways that you can get that. Anatomical loss or loss of use of both feet. So if you have amputations, which you do not, or loss of use of feet. Did it say radiculopathy or peripheral neuropathy on the next slide? Peripheral neuropathy and shin splints. If those are to the level where you can't balance on one foot and you can't propulse off of your foot, that could potentially be loss of use of the feet. So that is a way to get to SMCL. Another way is loss of use of hand and foot, one of each. So that's another, I don't see that here. Blindness in both eyes, I don't see that here. Permanently bedridden, it doesn't sound like that's the case here. The other way to get to SMCL, and this is the one I think is probably the one that you might look at, is a regular need for aid and attendance. If you are needing help with getting dressed, getting undressed, feeding yourself, personal hygiene, keeping yourself clean, keeping yourself taken care of, 100% for depressive disorder, that might mean that you need somebody to be there with you to keep you safe from your environment. So I would look at that as a possible way to get to SMCL through aid and attendance. That I think is probably stronger than trying to add the GERD and sleep apnea. Okay, next question is from DJ Brown 92. Service connected for sleep apnea from 2018. Recently, the Board of Veterans' Appeals granted sinusitis and chronic cough back to 2004. Rhinitis backdated to 2004. Appealing to the Board of Veterans' Appeals for earlier effective date of sleep apnea to 2004 with other respiratory conditions. How does Spicer versus McDonough apply in layman's terms? Is it applicable to earlier effective date but for cause? Okay, I thought we had 3 parts. So Spicer kind of broadens what you can look at for what causes something. In layman's terms, I mean, that's the easiest way to say it. It's saying that you can go, through a chain is one way to do that. You could say your back injury causes obesity, which causes sleep apnea, those kind of things where it's like you can kind of go through a chain, or it just sort of expands what you can do for what causes what as far as secondary conditions. Go back to the first part of this question again. Okay. Now, earlier effective date, there is no freestanding claim for earlier effective date. You can't just file a claim for earlier effective date. If you have a claim for sleep apnea that started in 2004 that you have consistently appealed, then you might be able to use this to say, the sinusitis caused the sleep apnea. Now that the sinusitis is granted, can I go back and say it was the cause of the sleep apnea? As far as the effective date, that's only going to help you if you have consistently appealed that sleep apnea. If you didn't appeal it, or if you didn't have a claim back in 2004, Spicer's not going to get you there. Okay, next question. Fibs. I got my bilateral radiculopathy secondary to 40% lumbosacral strain claim denied. Any advice how to move forward? I thought the 2 claims support one another. They absolutely do. Radiculopathy in your lower extremities is automatically supposed to be considered with the back. They usually don't give you a hard time about causation. So there's a couple of things that could have happened. If you look at your CMP exam, I would get a copy of the report if you can do that and see what that said. It might have said you didn't have radiculopathy, because sometimes they don't even ask you, are you having these problems? And they just mark no because you didn't mention it. Or, maybe for some reason they didn't feel like you have radiculopathy. Maybe they thought it was neuropathy if you're diabetic or something like that. And so there's several different reasons why they might have denied it. They could just be wrong. They might just not have seen that you had a diagnosis for radiculopathy. If you have a doctor who is saying that you have that and you have a diagnosis that's confirmed, I would file those records with a supplemental appeal and go ahead and, let them see my back is causing this problem. They may not think you have the problem, or they may not understand that it's caused by your back, but that's if you have radiculopathy from your back, that's usually a pretty easy one to win. So I would push forward on that one and appeal it. Okay, this question is from Mickadoodle. I believe I have seen your name before. Welcome back. Hello, I've been granted SMCM May of 2025 by the board. I am 60% bilateral hands RA to 2021, 40% 2018, TMJ 30%, left ankle sprain 2023, 20% for the right knee, left knee, and 10% for left knee. My effective date did not go all the way back to 2009 like the hands did. The RO gave the effective date to the intent to file December of 2022. I just appealed with a form 10182 for direct review. I might be calling to Higher Hill and Ponton. Okay. Question. The RO granted with SMCM along with SMCP and SMCP subsection F, jumping it to SMC N.5. Can you explain what all that means? Thanks. So there's a couple of different ways, and I'm not really sure in your case what exactly happened here, but to get from M to N.5 using Section P is not really, it's not a special monthly compensation on its own. It's a way to bump your level of SMC up, your special monthly compensation. So you get a half step up, say from N to N.5, if you have different conditions that add up to 50% on top of the conditions that got you to M, or you might have a condition at 100% on top of the conditions that got you to M, and that would get you a whole step. So it looks like you got 1.5 steps, or it could be 3 half steps up from the M. So that's what P does, is it helps you, it just provides ways for you to get your rating up with half steps or whole steps, depending on other disabilities that aren't implicated in that M. I know that sounds really confusing, but it's really confusing, hard question. So great job getting your SMC up to that level. That's hard to do on your own, and congratulations. Okay, this question is from Grace Smith. I filed supplemental for mental health last month, scheduled for CMP exam 2 weeks later, had the exam yesterday. Now everyone pray, covered all bases according to your newsletter. Great. What I will say to you is, don't be discouraged if you don't get a grant right away, or if you don't get the rating that you think you're entitled to. I always tell people, just be persistent and continue to appeal things. So, hopefully they're going to give you what you deserve on this first try, and get this, well, not first try if it's a supplemental, you've done this before, but hopefully all your evidence is in line, and they're going to grant this for you. But if they don't, keep going, get a medical opinion of your own, do what you need to do, but absolutely appeal if you don't like the response. Okay, this one's from Remy 86 again. I have service-connected peripheral neuropathy, bilateral shin splints, and knee strains. I recently, in a CMP exam from 2 years ago, sent in a CMP exam from 2 years ago. I was diagnosed with bilateral radiculopathy. How would I word it if I file for it? So it depends. So I don't see... It depends what the radiculopathy was caused by. I don't see that you have a service-connected back condition that you're listing here. That's usually what we connect radiculopathy to. The other question that I would have is, if you said you're service connected already for peripheral neuropathy, if that's in your lower extremities and the bilateral radiculopathy is in your lower extremities, they're not going to give you separate ratings for that unless it affects separate nerves. So you can get a rating for your sciatic nerve and a separate rating for the femoral nerve if you have both of those. So the thing that you would want to do is make sure you know what nerve is being affected and apply for that if it's different than the nerve that's being affected by the neuropathy, if that makes sense. So you probably want to get your doctor involved, but you can file for radiculopathy secondary to whatever it's secondary to. That's how I would word that. Okay, this question's from Lonnie Brinson. What's the timeline for a board hearing with a waived hearing, just evidence review? I'm over 1,245 days. So if you are in the board hearing lane, even though you waived the hearing, you don't get out of the hearing lane. You stay there. Unless you got out and changed over into the evidence lane before the 1 year mark. So if you're saying that you waived the hearing and moved to the evidence lane within the 1 year of filing your appeal, the evidence lane, I'm seeing 3-4 years on some decisions. We have cases that have been sitting a while in the evidence lane. The hearing lane is worse. I have cases that, I don't actually file very many cases in the hearing lane because I don't find that to be a good use of our time. I usually go direct lane or evidence lane because the hearing lane takes forever. 1,200 days does not actually seem out of line with what I have seen. So, you can always ask the board for a status update. Just make sure they have your hearing, they have your appeal docketed. And if they do, unfortunately, all you can really do is wait unless you meet the criteria for an expedite. So if you're over 75, if you have a terminal illness or financial disaster, basically, if you can show a bankruptcy or a homelessness, something like that, then they will expedite. But 1,200 days that's a lot, but I have seen other cases that are taking that long. So that lane is just, even with the waived hearing, you're still in that same lane, and they're taking a really long time to make a decision. Okay, this question is from Agent 2017. Hello. Does VA apply bilateral factors for left and right lower extremity peripheral neuropathy? Thank you. They do. So, for instance, if you had 10% for each, you get an extra 1.9 percent added on there if it's left and right. So yes, absolutely, it does apply to neuropathy. Brent Palace. At 50% PTSD, CMP exam marked 70% higher level review in progress. I also have, marks 50%, CMP exam marked 70%. Higher level review in progress. I have also 5 denied and 9 deferred, all of which are high value. Not sure about my next move strategy. That's a pretty broad question. I don't know what your 5 denied and 9 deferred claims are. The deferred, all you can do at this point is wait unless you have new evidence, in which case go ahead and submit that to the VA now while they're still working on your claim. The 5 denied claims, it depends what they're for. Also for the 9 deferred, really. If you have, okay, let's see. I haven't been able to work since 2017 due to my PTSD, migraines, vertigo, 7, IBS. Is 96% the same as 100 and PNT if you're over 75? So 96% does round up to 100. If they make it a permanent and total, then it's the same as any 100% permanent and total. If you're over 75, that doesn't change whether it's permanent and total, although usually they will make it permanent and total due to your age. They're not going to do a whole lot of reevaluations at that point. So yes, if you can get to 96%, then you have 100. If you're already at 70% for the PTSD, though, I would consider going ahead and filing for unemployability as well. So it's a backup. That way, if they grant that and they make it permanent and total, it's the same exact benefits as anybody else with 100% permanent and total. So I would go ahead and file that as my backup plan. That way, if they grant it, I mean, you could drop those other issues and have VA out of your life. You know, they have them just paying your 100% and not have to deal with them any further. You know, and if they go ahead and grant those deferred issues and then you end up 100% scheduler, doesn't hurt anything. You haven't lost anything by filing for unemployability, but I would go ahead and do that. Submit your VA form 8940. Okay, this question's from Carl Hands, 1 of 2. Veteran has PTSD diagnosis 2023, 70% service-connected PTSD 2024. Experienced PTS symptoms for many, many years between service and diagnosis. Now submitting claim for migraine secondary to PTSD. Should we include all private medical records related to migraines over the years, or should we only include migraine records post-PTSD diagnosis? So that's an interesting question. You can only be service connected as of when you filed the claim. So it's not, they're not saying you didn't have PTSD prior to that, but they're saying they won't pay for it prior to that. So if the migraines, if your records show that you had migraines before you had PTSD symptoms, not got service connected for, but before you had it, that's not helpful to your claim. But if the medical records show you had PTSD and you weren't service connected for it, and it was causing the migraines, it doesn't matter if that happened before you actually got service connected, only that the migraines themselves didn't actually precede the condition, not the service connection. So if that makes sense, I would go ahead and include anything I had that connected the migraines and the PTSD. That's, as far as like the severity of the migraines, things like that, that's going to be based just on the condition after the date that it's service connected. So, showing that you had really bad migraines before doesn't really necessarily help your claim unless it's showing there was a connection to the PTSD. So you don't have to file everything, but I would go ahead and file it if it's favorable. Okay, this question is from LOM Fallways, LOMF always. Claim remanded back to the RO 6 months ago. The judge had some questions for the VA resident doctor, who is probably gone by now. Anything I can do to speed up the process? I already filed 0820 to speed up. C. Okay, I'm not sure what that end part means. There's not a whole lot you can do to speed the VA up. They're going to get there. If the judge wanted a new CMP exam or had questions for the CMP examiner, even if that one's gone, they're going to get a new one to do it. So I don't really think there's anything that you can do to speed things up. You can give them a private medical opinion, but I know the VA well enough to know they're going to get their own opinion anyway, particularly if the board told them they had to. When the board mandates something, even something that you can't do, the VA is going to try to do it, or at least, if they don't, then that's a mistake on their part. So they are probably going to go ahead and try to do what they were told to do by the board. I wish I had some good advice for you, but I don't really know a way to speed that up. Just as long as they're working on it is probably all you can ask for. Okay, this one's from Carl Hans. Decision letter denying service connection cites service treatment records for 2020 to 2024, but the veteran served 1990 to 2006. In-service treatment for condition ignored by rater. Decision letter denying service connection states no VA treatment records, but diagnosis and current treatment is plentiful in VA Blue Book. Pertinent entries were uploaded with claim. Should the veteran attempt HLR or just file a supplemental with a statement noting discrepancies? I'd file an HLR. And the reason for that is because the higher level review, those reviewers are more experienced. They generally know they're the people with a little more seniority than the supplemental claim lane, or at least that's my understanding. So if you point out to them the mistake, this is what they said, but this is what's actually going on. As long as that's already all in the record, you can file a higher level review. Now, if you want to submit new evidence, you have to go supplemental. But if the evidence is already all there and all you need to do is point it out to the rater, the decider, I would go ahead and do a higher level review. You can always file another supplemental if the HLR denies it. You can always do a supplemental with a statement then, or go to the board at that point. Okay, this question, David Santiago, the court says obesity is now a disability. I saw something about that a couple of days ago, and I have not had a chance to go and look at the court decision yet. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there is a new case on that. I will try to update you on that soon, but there is case law out on that. I don't know what it says. I have not read it yet. Okay, Serge P. Hi, submitted lower back claim post-back surgery in 2009 and 2014. Had a clear history of injuries in service and a clear diagnosis with treatment and back surgery. In 2024, got approved. Q. Okay, let's see. So I'm not sure where, so clear and unmistakable error is what Q is. And that means there has to have been a decision that they made an error in. So I'm assuming you're saying you had an earlier decision. Oh, wait, let's see. Here we go. Multiple injuries for lower back in service with evidence. Back surgeries and diagnosis post-service denied in 2009 and 2014 with no CMPs. Claim approved in 2024 with same evidence. Q. Possibly, but here's the thing. Q is really hard to prove. I'm not saying you don't have it, but it's very specific. You have to have, so basically you have to show that with just the evidence they had back then, and you're saying it was the same evidence, they should have granted it. And that's including a CMP exam. So their failure to give you a CMP exam is not Q. Failure for the duty to assist is not Q, because the way they look at it, you could have appealed that back then and you didn't, or maybe you did and they denied it again. But Q is very, very narrow. So possibly, but not necessarily. So if they gave you a CMP exam in 2024 based on the same evidence they had in 2009, and then based on that CMP they granted, that's not Q, because there's new evidence, the evidence from the CMP exam. You have to prove that based on just what they had without anything else added, that they should have granted it. There's no question that they should have granted it. Not that they should have given you a CMP exam, because that's, a failure of the duty to assist. They very clearly have determined that that is not Q. Okay. This one is from Goosey Lucy 01. My husband has 100% VA disability with PTSD, depression. However, he has Parkinsonism, dementia, still trying to see what else he has. I, the wife, applied to aid and attendance. Is that good? Yes. Make sure when you're applying for aid and attendance that you only are talking. So you have to have your doctor fill out what's a 2680 form. It's a VA form for aid and attendance. And make sure that your doctor is only talking about service-connected conditions. So if the Parkinsonism and the dementia are not service-connected and that is why he needs aid and attendance, then aid and attendance won't be granted. So you need them to focus just on his VA service-connected disability. Now, if the Parkinson's can be service-connected, I would go ahead and file for that and get it service-connected. And then, aid and attendance is usually at some point with Parkinson's going to be needed. So, it might be in the future, it might be now, but if that is a service-connected condition, absolutely pursue aid and attendance. If it's not, then see if you can get the aid and attendance based just on those service-connected conditions. Okay, great to be loved. Should I use an attorney for an HLR? Migraines denied secondary to tinnitus. I have a diagnosis, nexus, log, and 2 supporting letters from my family. Although they have acknowledged evidence connection. No second part? Okay. You could use an attorney. It sounds like you have everything you need here. If you have, the nexus is the main thing here. If they're denying it, there's some reason they don't, probably their CMP examiner said, oh no, migraines aren't connected to tinnitus, which we know they are. That's a very realistic claim. So don't take their word for that. You maybe need a stronger nexus. You maybe need, a statement from the veteran kind of explaining how the tinnitus affects the migraines might help. It sounds like they have a bad CMP exam here, so you're going to have to get around that. If you can't do it on your own, yes, absolutely get an attorney, but that may be something that you can do on your own if you have somebody that can maybe give you a stronger nexus if that's the problem. Darren Heaton, I'm already rated at 70% for a Mint HUD's condition. I don't actually know what that is. Should I file for PTSD as well because I'm a combat veteran? I wonder if that's mental health condition. It's supposed to be MH and it auto-corrected you. If you are already 70% for a mental health condition, filing for PTSD is not going to probably change your rating. So the way the mental health rating code works, it's the same symptoms. They just list symptoms. They don't list diagnoses. So if you have service-connected depression and service-connected PTSD and service-connected anxiety, they're still only going to look at your symptoms, no matter what your diagnosis is. So adding a diagnosis only helps if it has symptoms that your service-connected condition does not have. So for instance, if, a lot of them overlap so much that the symptoms kind of are just one big ball, it's kind of, they're overlapping and you can't tell which of these conditions causes what mental health symptom. And that's why they do rate it the way they do. So for like a 70% rating, they're going to look at the symptoms, not the diagnosis. So it's not probably, I don't think it's going to help you to add PTSD unless there are some symptoms that aren't being compensated at the 70% rate. Okay, this question's from Daniel Flynn. When it comes to radiculopathy for the lower extremity, namely the legs, my EMG shows I have no nerve damage, but the neurologist told me I can have radiculopathy without nerve damage from an EMG. Okay, then yeah, so file it. That's absolutely, sometimes if you are having the symptoms and you're having radiculopathy in your legs from, I guess, a service-connected back condition, possibly, if you're having those symptoms, then file the claim. Absolutely. And they don't always, VA is not going to necessarily rely on an EMG. They're going to rely somewhat on what you tell them the symptoms are. So I would get that filed as soon as possible. Okay. This question's from NomVet 6567. 100% PTSD, SMCS, housebound from 89. Claim for aid and attendance dating back to 89. Multiple denials, last on about 5 years ago. Didn't appeal. In 2014, I lost my house due to my cooking. Advised VA. Denied aid and attendance. 2018. Help. So I don't know what evidence you're giving them, but what I would recommend is, aid and attendance is a lot of times misunderstood by VA for mental health. So, they look at the form and they're saying, okay, well, you can bathe yourself and you can feed yourself. So you're good. You can put on your clothes by yourself so you don't get aid and attendance. But the way aid and attendance is set up, it also applies if you need help to protect yourself from your environment. And this losing your house due to cooking and forgetting to turn the stove off or something like that, that counts. So you need your doctor to do the 2680 form. I would also maybe get statements from people that know you and can explain what's going on with you. Can explain, VA should take your word. You give them a statement, you advise them what happened to you, and they ignored that. I would, get your statement in there, get the statement of anyone that knows about your situation, get the doctor's letter. And if they don't grant it, appeal it. Make sure you continue to appeal it, go to the board, get another doctor's opinion if you need to. But that sounds like that you would be entitled to aid and attendance. You just kind of have to get the evidence together for the VA to see that. Okay, this is another question from Brent Palace. I have 35 years service in aircraft and jet engine maintenance, jet engine maintenance, 10% tinnitus, but denied migraines at 8 average per month. VA not service connected. Any thoughts? Again, I am 76 years old at 80%. So tinnitus can cause migraines, and you need a doctor to say that. That's how you win that one at the VA. We know that tinnitus causes migraines. They don't necessarily love that. Their CMP examiners, I don't know that I have seen a CMP examiner say that migraine was caused by tinnitus. Occasionally I have, I think, but usually no. So you need your own doctor to say that. That's what I would get in the record. And, I absolutely think, yes, that should be service connected. If you're having 8 migraines a month, that's probably a 50% rating. If they're the kind of migraines that are prostrating and you have to go lie down in a dark, quiet room and do nothing, that's 8 a month is a lot. So that would probably be a 50% rating. It may or may not get you the rest of the way to 100% based on the way, VA combines their ratings instead of adding them. But I would definitely appeal that with a medical opinion. Okay, this question is from JRH. Thanks for all that you do. I am service connected for essential tremors. I am considering filing for loss of use of hands as my tremors have diminished my fine motor skills. My primary care physician and neurologist both filled out 2680 forms for aid and attendance as I need regular assistance with ADLs. Would this qualify for loss of use of hands? I am also service connected for major depressive disorder 70%, ulcerative colitis 60%, sleep apnea 50%, migraines 30%, and have SMCK. Is there a path to R1 via half steps if I get SMCM for loss of use of hands? So let's see. I read that veterans who have a combination of SMC N1/2 and K are automatically granted R1. Any truth to that? I don't know that one. I have not heard that. I am looking at your situation and thinking, if you have loss of use of hands and you need aid and attendance based on your other conditions not involving loss of use of hands, that's 2 L's, which would get you to, let me think. I'll get you to M. I'd have to think on this. I'd need to take a look at this. I don't know. I don't think N.5 and K gets you to R1. R1, you need a certain level of aid and attendance. So I don't know that it might depend how you get the N.5. This one's a little complicated for me to answer without looking at all the facts and kind of sitting down with it. So I apologize. I don't think I can answer this one here. But I mean, good job for getting that level of it. Let me look back at the first part of that question. Tremors, loss of use of hands. Yeah, I don't think I can answer that one off the top of my head, but I'd love to take a look at that. I think, go to the next part. Aid and attendance and the next part. I think you probably do have a path in there somewhere, but I'd need to sit down and think about it. I apologize. I can't answer that off the top of my head. Okay. Next question. Darren Heaton. I am rated at 70% for a mental health condition. I am also a combat veteran. Should I apply for PTSD as well? We already answered that one. Grace Smith, thank you. You all are always on point, except for that last question that I couldn't answer on the special monthly compensation. I'm going to come back to that one and take a look at it. Okay. Next, how often do you do lives? We do a live we do one every week. We do one every Wednesday from 2 to 3 Eastern time. Every now and then there's one we can't make, but generally someone's here every day, every Wednesday to answer your questions. Sometimes it's different attorneys, but we try to have somebody here every week. Joseph, thanks to all who serve. Stay in the fight. You can get what you deserve from the VA. I served 1990 to 99 and 2010 to 2023. Thank you for your service. And I absolutely agree with you. Stay in the fight, get what you deserve. You know, it's that's really important, is to keep your appeals going, keep your claims. You know, if you have a claim, file it. Absolutely. Don't wait around for you to, to get all your evidence together to get it perfect. Get your claims filed and keep appealing them. Don't let those appeal dates get past you. Okay, Darren Heaton. I had a CMP exam for increase on my ME. They didn't use the instrument to measure my range of motion, but they only increased it from 10% to 20%. If they didn't use the instrument, it was not a valid CMP exam. So they're supposed to use a goniometer to measure your range of motion. So I would file a statement from you explaining that they did not use that. They didn't use a goniometer or any other instrument to measure your range of motion. And I would file a supplemental claim with that statement. And, that's not a valid exam, so they have to give you another one. Another step, part 1 of 2. Helping a friend. A Marine discharged 10 years ago with 0% bilateral hearing, 10% tinnitus. He is now noticing problems with his hearing. He does not use VA healthcare, but due to other service-connected disabilities, he is eligible. What should he do to get proper evidence in order to file for an increase? Thanks, just trying to pay it forward. So he can file an increase without any evidence at all. All he has to say is it's worse than it used to be. And then they will give him an exam and evaluate that. If he doesn't want to see him, he's getting a CMP exam, but if he doesn't want that to be his only evidence, he can go to any audiologist and get them to do an exam and look at his hearing loss. Hearing loss is one that I feel like is underrated by the VA. So a lot of times, even though it's pretty profound hearing loss in real life and it really affects you, they're still going to give it a 0 or 10% rating. It's really low. It has to be very profound hearing loss for them to rate it in any kind of reasonable way. So go to I would recommend that he go to his audiologist and get them to do a hearing test. But if he can't do that, just file the claim and go with a CMP exam and, see if it's numbers based. So, if they give him any kind of adequate question or adequate exam at all, it's going to be, they'll get the rating correct. Okay. Next question. Alexander Breeding. I sustained a TBI, traumatic brain injury, in service and was treated. However, the treatment record is not in my medical records. I have since been diagnosed with Meniere's disease by my ENT and primary care. I have records of treatment for multiple potential causes in my records, but not the TBI. What's the best way to get this claim approved? Possibly buddy letter or just my own testimony. If you have someone that remembers that you had that TBI, I would definitely put that in. If you don't have that, give your own statement, explain exactly what happened, and they may be able to look at the circumstances of your service and if it was in combat, for instance, if you were exposed to an IED, if something happened in combat, there's a combat presumption that if what your statement might be enough. So I would get the claim filed with your own testimony, your own statement. And if you have somebody to support you and say that happened, absolutely put that into. It kind of depends how the TBI happened, whether you need supporting evidence for that or not. Okay. This one's from King Kong on 6S. Had a CMP exam and they proposed reduction, and I filed a statement and filed for hearing. Do they have to have evidence I've improved material or it's sustained? Yes. They did not use goniometer for flexion and extension issues either. Of course they didn't. My question is, can they use one exam to support a reduction? Yeah, no, they cannot. They had one exam is not enough, and they do have to say that if there was any improvement, that it was in the ordinary course of life, so that if you were disabled and then you stopped working, and so your back's better because you're not working anymore, and you can baby it and you can do what you need to do to protect your back because you're not working, that's not really in the ordinary course of life. So they do need new evidence. I mean, they do need more evidence than one exam. So, absolutely appeal that, and also do put in a statement as part of that, letting them know that they didn't use the goniometer. Okay, do we have any more questions? Is that the last one? Oh, we do have one more. Would the veteran request a higher level review since the bilateral factors were never applied to his ratings for peripheral neuropathy, left and right? Thank you. Yes. That's a pretty easy mistake for them to correct if you're sure that they did that. So if you don't have the rating sheet, I would ask they sometimes don't send you guys the rating sheet for some reason with your rating decision, but it will show whether they use the bilateral factor or not. Sometimes the bilateral factor does not change the outcome because it's only going to be, so if you have 10% ratings, it's only a 1.9. So if you have two 10s, you're going to have a 20% rating with or without the bilateral factor. So, if you're sure they didn't use it, I would file the appeal, but you might want to get the rating sheet and see if it's there or not. Okay, I think we have one more question, and then we're going to finish up a little early today. Nope, that was the last question. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for being here today. Like we said earlier, somebody will be here next Wednesday to answer your questions, and thank you for your service.